Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Today, we are doing our guest speaker panel on Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome and Hypermobility Spectrum Disorder. These are shortened as EDS and HSD. And we have some wonderful speakers here today who are going to be sharing their lived experiences with these conditions. Just a quick reminder that we are recording today's meeting. So if you want to have your camera off, please feel free to do that. And this will be posted on our YouTube channel. So quick access check. So we like to do verbal image descriptions before anyone new is speaking. So I would, if I were going, I would say I'm Probnor, I'm a South Asian woman, I'm wearing a black sweater, and I have black hair. And then also Annika will be co-hosting this guest panel with me. So Annika, if you want to do your introduction, that would be great.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Annika. I'm a white woman with dark brown hair and curtain bangs, and I'm wearing a tan shirt and a green sweater today.
Awesome, thanks. And then also we have captions available. If you go on the bottom panel of Zoom, there's a CC button, and you can access captions through that. And if you have any other accommodation needs, please let us know in the chat. So just an important disclaimer, everything we're going to be talking about is not medical advice. We ask that you please consult your doctor if you do have any medical concerns. And then also something we really try to emphasize is that each person with a condition is unique, even if they have the same diagnosis. So we really want to be respectful of that individual lived experience. And finally, we're not experts on these topics, but our guest speakers are experts on their own experiences and their lives. And we're going to really have some great conversations tonight. So we're looking forward to that. But before we hop into all of that, just a quick background we like to do at every meeting. What exactly is Invisible Illness Awareness Network? So we are a 501c3 nonprofit that is dedicated to raising awareness about invisible illnesses, chronic illnesses, and disabilities. And a big focus of the nonprofit is also supporting students at universities in starting affiliate organizations, so they too can really have these conversations and become leaders about in the area of chronic illness and kind of educate their fellow peers and foster inclusive environments. And then more specifically, the Invisibly Aware Series is what we're at today. And so these are the virtual events we hold on Zoom twice a month. And the first event is usually an informational presentation on the topic, while the second event is a guest speaker panel. So earlier this month, we had a informational educational presentation about Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome and HSD. And today we're at our guest speaker event as well. Quick information about our social media. So we are all over social media. We have an Instagram for the nonprofit as a whole, which is Invisible_Illness_Network. And then we also have an Instagram for our Invisibly Aware series. And then, like I mentioned, this video is going on our YouTube channel. So definitely be sure to check that out. If you missed a previous guest speaker panel and want to refer to one of those videos, we have all those up there. And then we also have a website. And then if you scan the QR code on the slide right here, there is access to a link tree, which will have more links and information about our newsletter sign up. If there are any questions, feel free to ask at any point in the Zoom. You can message me or Annika. You can put them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer the questions to the best of our knowledge. And with that, I will pass it to Annika for a little bit.
Okay, so we want to give just some general takeaways from the educational presentation that we had 2 weeks ago. So everyone's on at least a general understanding of what Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome is. So to start with, Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome is actually a group of heritable connective tissue disorders. They connect connective tissue, which includes tendons, ligaments, joints, organs, skin, even blood vessels, and parts of your bone, which so essentially can affect almost every part of someone's body. Most notably, it impacts collagen, which is one of the most abundant proteins in connective tissue throughout the body. There are 13 specific types of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, each with their own defined genetic mutation, symptoms, and specific complications that go along with their type. And the symptoms can vary by type, but most of them include joint hypermobility and instability of joints, skin hyperextensibility, abnormal scarring, easy bruising, fatigue, and chronic pain. The prevalence of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome does vary by type. Or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS, is estimated to affect 1 in 3,000 to 5,000 people throughout the world. Hypermobile EDS is one of the most common, affecting 320 people per million, while all other types are a little bit more rare, with some types affecting less than 1 in a million. Treatments can vary person to person, but treatments for pain and physical and occupational include pain management, physical and occupational therapy, mobility aids, braces, splints, and sometimes surgery. And the complications can also vary by type, but may include surgical complications, as there can be issues with healing for those who have EDS. Arthritis and pregnancy complications are also common. And in vascular EDS, life-threatening risks like aneurysm and organ rupture are also possible. Now, we also want to bring up hypermobility spectrum disorder, or HSD, which is a connective tissue disorder that is typically diagnosed when a specific EDS criteria are not met. There are generalized, peripheral, localized, and historical types, also not categorized as a type of EDS. But the symptoms can share some similarities to EDS, but does not encompass all of the EDS symptoms to gain that specific diagnosis. The prevalence actually seems to be relatively common compared to other diseases, but the exact prevalence is unknown, though the treatments are often managed in similar ways to EDS. And it's important to note that symptoms can be as debilitating and severe as those with EDS, and just because it doesn't fit all the criteria does not mean that it is not a condition that is important to know about. Pradma, if you could introduce our speakers.
Yes, thanks, Annika. So we have our wonderful speakers here today, Alexis, Aaron, and Sarah. And if you all want to just go around quickly and do a quick introduction of yourselves, any facts you would like to share, and then also your verbal access description as well.
Should I go first since I'm on the slide first, I guess? So,
yeah.
Okay, cool. So, hi everyone. My name is Alexis Homegrren. I use she, they pronouns. I have short blonde hair, pink glasses, and I'm wearing a black and white zebra striped shirt. I'm a researcher in my regular life at the University of Ottawa's Institute of Mental Health Research, and I've been a passionate advocate for accessibility and inclusion since I was 12 years old. So I live with EDS as well as additional life-threatening rare genetic disorders. So I kind of like to joke that I either won or lost the genetic lottery, depending on how you think about it. And I'm really passionate about rare disease patient advocacy as well as advocacy for young caregivers. And I will pass it to Erin to introduce herself next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erin Vego, pronouns she, her. I am a white woman with also short blonde hair, although not quite as short as Alexis's. Hairstyle looks amazing on you, by the way. I am wearing a purple shirt and blue glasses. I have been working in patient advocacy since 2013, which was before my first chronic illness diagnosis, which was juvenile psoriatic arthritis. I have been a caregiver and a sibling for even longer than that. My sister and I have a similar health picture, not exactly the same. We do vary some, but I grew up going, hey, is this a problem for you? Yeah. Is this a problem for you? Yeah. And such conversations like that. I'm also currently a member of the Disability Inclusion Advisory Council at Penn State Health. I was a founding member of that, and it's been a wonderful opportunity to volunteer at my own hospital, where I receive most of my treatment and help make a difference for people with disabilities, because, oh boy, the lack of access is overwhelming. Yeah, I think that's it for now.
Everyone, I'm Sarah Hamist. I am co-founder and co-president of IIAN. I have I should do my image description. I am a white woman with brown hair that's in a ponytail, and I'm wearing a black shirt with little blue flowers on it. I unfortunately do not have a zebra shirt that fits me anymore. Otherwise, I would have worn that. I also have, I have HSD, and I also have POTS and my chronic migraine and immediately persistent headache and mast cell activation syndrome and a whole bunch of other things that we don't need to get into today. That's it.
Thank you so much. So the way we're going to be doing this, it's very informal. We're going to just be asking the questions, and all of you can answer in whatever order you want. If there's a question that you feel more drawn to answering and you want to answer versus a question you don't want to answer, please feel free to do what is comfortable for you. And with that, we'll just dive right in. And so our first question is, can you share a little bit about your experience living with an invisible illness or chronic illness? And I know this is a little bit vague, so more specifically, when did you start experiencing symptoms? And just a brief description about how your condition or conditions affect you on a day-to-day basis.
I could start. So I first noticed chronic illness symptoms around the age of 10 or so. It was actually a very coincidental circumstance. I had seen an article online that was titled something like "Adults Don't Know the Last Time They Woke Up Feeling Rested" or something like that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, like I'm a kid, I can figure this out. And I was like, okay, well, it wasn't yesterday. Well, it wasn't the day before. I don't think it was this week at all. And the more I thought back, the more I realized, oh, I don't know the last time I woke up rested from regular sleep. I think that's a problem, although I didn't actually get to it until about 4 years later, when I was diagnosed with arthritis. My main symptom overarching with all of my conditions is chronic fatigue. So I struggle a lot with staying awake, unless, of course, it's when I actually need to go to bed, heaven forbid. I'm sorry, my sarcasm is full on tonight, so you guys are getting that lack of a filter. I'm so sorry. Yeah, living with chronic illness, especially invisible illness as a young person, can be so isolating. One of the most isolating things about it for me was when I was doing my medication injections for my arthritis at home, and I never felt so invisible. It was such an isolating experience. I was terrified. I hated them. They hurt. I am unfortunately no longer on injections, so I'm very grateful for that. But even just being able to talk about my conditions was incredibly difficult because I did not know who I could trust. And there were some people who I was very open with who were not interested in hearing about my conditions, who did not have much empathy for me, who started avoiding me after I told them about it. That one was particularly difficult. And also, as a young person growing up in the Christian church, there was a lot of discussion about total healing, and there is a lot of implication, if you're not familiar with it, about, well, if there's something wrong with you, you're not faithful enough. So that was a very prevailing mentality as I was growing up, not from my parents, not from my family, thank goodness, but from the church around me most of the time, that I needed to be fixed and that I was somehow less worthy and less good of a Christian because of my illness. And one of the things that I started figuring out as I was getting older, I was like, well, I don't think the plan is for me to be healed here. I think that chronic illness is the long-term plan. And explaining that to anybody in the Christian church was, whew, heaven forbid. So yeah, it was incredibly isolating, except when I found my chronic illness network. So Sarah and I have been friends for several years now, and we kind of have a specific little network. Our parents have like a little network, and then so then the kids of those parents have their own little network too. So being, you know, with every bit as isolating as growing up with chronic illness and invisible illness in the regular world, I'll say, with every bit as isolating as that was, it was as freeing to be around people who also had invisible illnesses. And it still feels that way. So I am so incredibly grateful to have found people through social media, through medical conferences, through local events, et cetera, et cetera. And that makes day-to-day life workable. And I'm so grateful for them. What do you say?
I'm gonna basically just say I second everything Erin said. Meeting Erin and sister was one of the things that allowed me to actually like acknowledge that I had a chronic illness, because I definitely originally did not want to acknowledge that I had one. And yes, second everything else Erin said, basically. In terms of my symptoms with EDS specifically, my right shoulder is the thing primarily affected. So carrying anything or reaching for anything is essentially impossible with my right shoulder. And I'm right-handed. So I have to sort of retrain my brain a little bit to try to do things left-handed. Because otherwise I will reach with my right hand and most likely dislocate my shoulder, which I don't know, I've dislocated it hundreds of times at this point. I don't know where I was going with that. I guess I'll end it there.
Yeah, and I can just jump in. I maybe had a little bit of a different experience, but definitely still lots of similarities. So for me, I I literally don't remember a time in my life where I didn't have pain. Like that's not something that I can ever recall in conscious memory for me. So like I've always been in pain. I've always been covered in bruises. I've always been hurting myself just like existing, basically, almost like magic. Like my childhood nickname was literally Boo Boo Bear, like on reference to like both my love of Winnie the Pooh, but also hurting myself every 5 seconds. So, and that was well before my parents or anyone else knew there was any kind of like diagnosis involved with me. So I feel like that's a little bit of a funny trivia thing there. And in my life, I have never slept. I relate to that a lot. Like even as a baby, I would not sleep. I don't know how my mom lived through that. Um, like I literally just would scream and scream, and now we think it was probably because I was in pain and I just couldn't like really communicate that, of course, as a baby, but my parents didn't know and they had no way of knowing. And so for me, I would say the most challenging symptoms definitely second the chronic fatigue. That is really, really hard. I find that I'm taking naps more often these days. I'm trying to be more compassionate with myself about that because I feel like there's also a lot of judgment on that, that if you take naps, you're lazy, you're not trying hard enough. And it's like, of course, that's not true, but we've been trained through ableist society to have all of those thoughts and attitudes. So it's still hard, even though like I've knowingly lived with chronic illness since I was 12, have lived with it my whole life. It's still hard sometimes to get that voice out of the back of my head. And then the other biggest thing for me is definitely like the pain. So for me, I have quite severe pain and it's really pain on pain because every time you hurt yourself, it's more pain. Every time you dislocate something, it's more pain. And you just kind of add the layers of pain per se, as I kind of think of it. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit about my experience there. And
Actually, I know this is impromptu, but I kind of have a question for you guys as well that came up. What was the how did you learn about EDS and how did you learn that that's the thing you might have? for me, it was at a dysautonomia conference where I first heard about it. And then once I learned about it, I was like, no, that's not me. But then when I started to think about it, I always reference at school, we had to do the presidential fitness test and do the sit and reach, where they always thought I was cheating because I could get to the end of it. But I never realized it's because my knees are so hypermobile that I can easily do it without any problem because my knees go 17 degrees past not great. So they always thought I was cheating, but then I was like, I finally figured out, nope, that's hypermobility for you.
Yeah, for me, it was either at my first or second, I think really my second Dysautonomia International Conference. And it was a situation where it was, oh, that's my sister, Laura, but not Erin. And then as time went on, after she got diagnosed and my symptoms started progressing more, it was like, oh, maybe that is Erin too. Okay. So then it took me until a year ago to actually get my diagnosis, which was a very frustrating path. I'm sure we'll touch on that more later. But yeah, it was very much a gradual thing, like, oh, hang on a second, that happens to me. Oh, hang on a second, that happens to me. And fortunately for me, I don't dislocate very much, but I do sublux a whole lot. So
Yeah, and for me, it was a little bit of a weird story. I had never heard of EDS, and back then, like, HSD wasn't yet a diagnosis. This was back in, I think, 2014 was the first time I heard of it. And it was a physiotherapist I was seeing because I had severely sprained my ankle for the probably 107th time and was stuck in a air cast for like basically a year. They couldn't figure out why it wouldn't heal, all the classics there. And she went through the hypermobility scale with me, and she was like, wow, like, you're really hypermobile. Like, there's this thing that you should look up called EDS, and like, your ligaments are like bubble gum, where most people's are like rubber bands. And like, it was an interesting metaphor for a 14-year-old. But like, that was my first exposure to EDS. So then I go home, and as you do, you Google it, because of course you do. And I read it and I'm like, wow, okay, this explains basically a lot of my life. But I also didn't necessarily want that to be the case, because by then I already had two diagnosed, like, very rare diseases. I didn't want to deal with this. I was like, nope, I'm done. Can I tap out? Is there a diagnosis quota? Like, and of course, that's not a thing. I'm sure everyone in this room knows very well that's not a thing. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. And of course, as a physiotherapist, she couldn't officially diagnose me. There were other referrals involved. We can get into that later, but that was how I first found out that this was a thing that existed.
I have to say, I love that metaphor. It's very, I've never heard that before, but that's a good way to put it.
Thank you guys. And thanks for the question, Sarah. That's a really good one. It's so cool. And, kind of sad that these kinds of things are really just word of mouth at this point, that you guys have to learn about these from communities that are already talking about them, or people who aren't your physicians. And I'm glad that those communities existed and are trying to perpetuate that. So you could just some quick things. First off, Erin, sarcasm is absolutely welcome. And ultimately, it's very clear that you guys have had very different experiences already. I'm going to jump to what you guys are already starting to touch on now, which is asking you guys about your journey to getting diagnosed. So what did that look like for you individually? Did it take a long time? And what was your emotional reaction to actually receiving your diagnosis?
I could talk first again, but I don't want to capitalize.
Oh,
So
go for it. Yeah, we
okay.
get in a rhythm sometimes. Yeah, you're welcome to.
Okay. So my diagnosis journey it had its frustrations. It could have been worse. I know people with far worse stories than I have, and I'm grateful that mine is not super intense. But unfortunately, one of the difficult things when you live in a family that is itself riddled with chronic illness, it means that you are constantly triaging everything. So my mom, between my sister and I, would have to constantly triage, who do I take care of in the moment? Who do I prioritize with what, new doctor? Who do just questions like that. And so even with just yourself having to triage what to take care of next. And that can be an incredibly difficult thing to tease out. And often new doctors get pushed further and further down the list all the time, because most of the time it's not put urgent in quotation marks, because it kind of is, but also it kind of isn't. And once you start that process, it's usually pretty long and you have to kind of let go until it's done. And it can be very exhausting. So that is, at least for me, one of the things that often gets bumped down the list fairly easily. So it took a while to even be able to get to the point to book an appointment. The person who diagnosed my sister was and is no longer practicing by the time we were seeking an EDS evaluation for me, which honestly I didn't mind so much because I didn't really care for her when my sister saw her. I thought she was rather brash. So it was, of course, then also a matter of finding, okay, how far do we have to travel for this? Which is always a question, the more rare your condition is. So we were able to, there was no one at my local hospital that we knew of. There was someone else local that people either loved or hated. And I did not want to go to him because I had a feeling it would be the latter. And I have since met him, and that is exactly what would have happened. And he was rather stingy with his diagnosis, which was rough. Actually, I correct myself. There was someone at my local hospital also did not have a good reputation. He had refused to diagnose multiple people with like the most classic symptoms ever. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to get anywhere with him. So then went to someone who had been recommended in a Facebook group that I was in a Dysautonomia International Facebook group. And he unfortunately turned out to just not be good at all. And it took probably a year to get in with him at least, which I realize is not bad these days. And unfortunately, he had a lot of older information and not a lot of newer information. So my mom and I actually went to get evaluated together, and he did a very thorough assessment, but ultimately refused to give either of us the diagnosis. And I don't exactly remember why. And in the end, kind of the clincher for me, which is perhaps funny because it doesn't actually have anything to do with EDS, he gave us a booklet that had all of this information in it that was so generalizing. There was something on the back about diet, and it was like one size fits all, doesn't take into account any possible nuances. And there was also something in the booklet that called fibromyalgia a psychosomatic condition, which I have had fibromyalgia my entire life. It took me 16 and a half years to get diagnosed. No, it isn't. So I was like, oh, okay, that makes me not trust you a lot. He also wanted to get us into his meditation pain clinic. And I was like, that means you're going to make the pain my responsibility. And not really. No, it's not. So we did not end up participating in that, which I'm very grateful for. So then it took us another 1.5 to 2 years to actually find someone, fortunately here at home at my main hospital, who was diagnosing. And then getting in with him took another few months at least, and it was either like April of 2024 or 2025. So he must have had a cancellation or something. And then that finally was the clincher, and he did kind of like fudge it a little bit, because he said he thought I was a little bit tighter than normally someone with standard HEDS would be, but also because of my arthritis. He said, your joints are stiff. That's probably, tightened you up, for lack of a better term, and at least created the illusion that you're tighter. So that's what we're going to call it. And also, my place that I'm most hypermobile is also in my shoulders. And the Baton scale does not really evaluate that very well, which I'm not sure why, but it doesn't. So that was something that we weren't paying as close of attention to. So it was like, okay, but there's other stuff. Anyway, that was a very long and rambling answer, but that is how the journey went. I'm so grateful that that part of it is done.
Yeah, I think for me, as I mentioned, like I met the physiotherapist after an injury for me. And as a 14-year-old, like she told me, take this back to your pediatrician, talk about it, see where you go from there. So I did that, and he kind of decides to do his own little mini assessment there, probably to decide if he wants to refer me or not. And he starts seeing the exact same things, of course, as the physiotherapist does. So he puts in the referral, and he first refers me to a rheumatologist who I go see like 3 hours away from me. So, like, 6 hour round trip drive, not a fun time, not a great time for my mom either. But we go, and all for the rheumatologist to get us in the room for 5 minutes and say, well, I don't diagnose anything if it's not autoimmune, so I don't know why you're here right now. And I'm like, okay, why did you take the referral then? Like, we just, it's very expensive, it's very painful, it's really hard on families to do things like that just for like 5 minutes of being told you're not worth it, basically. So after that, I go back to the pediatrician, he refers me to, and that was like some time had passed, of course, with referrals. And then he refers me to genetics at the Children's Hospital in my province in Canada. And he was able to kind of expedite the process a little bit by really advocating strongly for me in the referral that he sent, which I'm very, very grateful for. I have two other conditions, and those are life-threatening, so it was really important that we knew kind of what was going to intersect with what, as I was staring down multiple heart surgeries. Like, we needed to know, did I need to be worried about all of these other complications and stuff? So that was really important to find out. So very, very lucky in a way. Not really, but that ended up working out. So I went to see genetics, and it was, of course, a very, very thorough assessment. I think we were there for almost 3 hours, one of the longest appointments of my life. And he did diagnose me with hypermobile EDS at that point. And I was diagnosed like 2 weeks, I think, after I turned 16. So and this was in 2016. So I was diagnosed kind of right before the new criteria came into place. So I think because of that, my journey was probably quote unquote easier than it would have been had I tried to find someone after that. But either way, like, I don't know, still going through all of that at the time was really challenging. And I started needing to use a cane at times when I was like 13 or 14. And so that was also really challenging because I like you know, let's be honest, kids can be mean. I got bullied for it. People were like, you know, you're a faker, you just want attention, like all of that. So, it made me feel so small. I wanted to be invisible. Like it was ironic. I felt invisible, but I wanted to be more invisible. And yeah, so all in all, the diagnosis, I was sad because it was like, oh, look, it's another thing that I need to deal with, that I have all of this other stuff that's trying to kill me. And now I have something that it won't necessarily kill me, but is kind of trying to kill my quality of life here. And for me, quality of life is like very, very important. So that was something that was really particularly devastating, that like, oh yes, your pain is real, which was very validating, but also in the same breath being told that like, oh, it makes sense that like you're getting worse as you get older, and that's probably going to keep happening for you. Like, you know, the whole everybody's trajectory is different, but in your case, I think it's going to get worse for you as time goes on. And that has been the case, unfortunately, for me. So I now use all sorts of different mobility aids depending on the day and what needs done and everything. But yeah, I think it was just such mixed emotions getting the diagnosis. Like so validating, so happy to hear it wasn't all in my head for once, but also like just sad that this was something that I was then facing, and that like it's incurable. There's no real treatment that can address the root cause of EDS. It's very piecemeal symptom management. And where I live, they'll tell you straight to your face that they don't believe in like mast cell activation syndrome, for example. So like they won't diagnose that here. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter who you go to, they don't believe in it. And of course, it's like sort of strange that we're not believing in a diagnosis that exists, but okay. But I've been told that so many times. So I can't even get evaluated for some things because of where I live. So that's also been an interesting roadblock, because I think that would probably be very beneficial, but I don't really have a choice based on where I live at this point. And that was also kind of long and rambly. So, Sarah, do you want to chime in if you want?
Sure. So as I said, I am diagnosed with HSD. So every medical professional that I've seen who knows about EDS basically has told me, yeah, you have EDS. I can't diagnose you with it though. I'm 1 point off from the current EDS criteria, and I am on well, I'm supposed to see a doctor in like 2 months or so, who supposedly will do the genetic testing. We'll see if that's true or not. It was, I believe it was from either the POTS Facebook group or the EDS Facebook group that we found that name. So theoretically, this doctor will do it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I mean, just from the journeys of like the diagnostic delays, and also like I feel like everyone brought up a lot about these logistical barriers, like whether that's geographical barriers, like being able to kind of access this very specialized care, all of the different hoops you have to jump through, like driving all these different hours, and like not even for like a guaranteed diagnosis, you know, and taking such like a big toll on the family, on you. And um, also just really want to take a moment to honor the emotional journey of the diagnosis. And I really, really appreciate how vulnerable and personal everyone has gotten. I know that's not easy to share. And so just want to really validate that, and just say thank you, because I think that a lot of times when we're talking about the diagnosis, it's really easy to focus on those like quantitative things, like how long it took or how many doctors you saw, but the psychological impact, I know that that's something we talk a lot about. We even had like a whole month dedicated to impact of chronic illness on mental health, but um, just really how that takes a toll on one mentally, and how you really navigate getting a diagnosis. I want to really hold space for that. So thank you so much. One We're going to skip around just a little bit, if that's all right, in the list of questions, just so we can be mindful of time. So one, I know everyone talked a little bit about this in terms of the different diagnoses and things that have worked and haven't worked, but more specifically for treatments that you've tried for your diagnoses, has there been something that specifically worked or something that stands out to you that definitely did not work, made symptoms worse? I know some like mobility aids were mentioned, so potentially those are helpful as well, but if there's any specific treatments that kind of jump out at you.
I think physical therapy, if you have a physical therapist who knows what they're doing when it comes to EDS, and that really is a key, can be helpful. My mom's sister and I kind of all like rotate out of PT with our physical therapist, and she has, I think last I knew, she had over 70 EDS patients. She is constantly booked up because she treats so many of us. I think one of the other things for me that has helped is I have pelvic issues that stem from a lot of different things. EDS is one of them. And so I did pelvic floor therapy a couple of years ago, and that really helped. It's kind of something that I can like pick up when I need to, put down when I don't. And that was helpful for stabilizing my pelvis, at least some. One of the other things is honestly finding a good position to sit down or lie in. Um, Speaking specifically about pelvic support, if I don't get decent amount of pelvic support in a certain amount of time, oh boy, my body lets me know. So I will often go and kind of like lay on my stomach on the edge of something, either my bed or a bench or something like that. A picture of it somewhere at the DI conference from 4 years ago. But being able to support your body as your body tells you that it needs it is really one of the key things. And sometimes something that is difficult to navigate is different providers will tell you, oh, don't sit like that. Oh, that's terrible for your posture. For me, it's been you have to balance it out more than that. Yes, I realize sitting sideways on my recliner with my legs all splayed is not great for my back, but boy, does it feel good for my legs. So you have to really figure out how to balance it and also give yourself grace when it comes to sitting in positions that feel best for your body.
I think that's such a good point, like the balancing everything out. Yes, I cannot emphasize that enough. But also for me, physio is one that like it's worked for me for severe injuries and things like that. Like it's enough to kind of not regain all the functioning I had, but at least like improve from where I am at the time of injury. But it's never helped me with like general day-to-day functioning. But again, like I don't necessarily have access to someone who's specialized in that. She just kind of heard about it at a conference type thing. So she had her best intentions and everything, but I don't live in a place where I have access, so hard to say if that would help more or not if I did. But something that has helped is I had a great occupational therapist. She was definitely more familiar with EDS and HSD, and she told me she had multiple people who traveled from out of town to come here, which is so funny because I live in like a pretty small city, mostly rural area, so like people driving into here is very odd for care. That's not something you see much. So she's pretty great. And like some of the best life hacks she showed me was getting like really, really thick handled utensils, which are my absolute favorite things. I had to special order them from the US because I guess Canada doesn't make them. But either way, it was worth the import charges. And I made it work. And then also like sounds random, but she would drill a hole through a tennis ball. Like in the middle of one appointment, she just drilled a hole through a tennis ball. I thought she had finally, lost it or something. And then she hands it to me and she hands me a pencil and she goes, okay, this is how you're going to write your exams that I know you have to write. And like here we use Scantrons. I think that's used in the States too. And, so some tests you have to use so-called normal pencils. And so that was how I did it, with a tennis ball with the pencil driven through it with a drill. And that was like such a lifesaver when I was still in high school and everything. Like absolute lifesaver, because I don't think I could have done it otherwise. My fingers are some of the most severely affected for me. So I also use a lot of like speech to text software. That has also been a lifesaver, but it varies so widely on whether it hates my accent or not. Like I'm told I have a little bit of a yeehaw accent because I'm in Alberta, I'm in the prairies. We are like a little bit, more farmers and things like that. So I get it. But some programs work better than others for sure. But definitely a super helpful strategy, especially writing essays. And now that I'm doing research and things, it really helps for me to write out like long paragraphs and get started with that kind of thing with academic writing as well, because that can be really, really exhausting. And I think the other thing for me is like, I tried some of the more, I guess, talked about treatments. Like I tried low dose naltrexone and it made me so much worse. I literally felt like my entire body was on fire. I don't know what that was. I don't know if I'm just a outlier of a case, but it was one of the worst experiences I've ever been through in terms of like trialing things. So there were lots of other meds I failed too. It wasn't special. It's just one in particular that I think was like physically the hardest on me with that. And yeah, not sure why it just worked out that way, but I'm on kind of more of a regimen now that it doesn't fix the pain, but it at least helps where I'm able to function somewhat day to day with other things like the braces, like the splints, like the mobility aids, like the finger splints as well. You can't see them, I guess they're skin tone, but yeah, like that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's been just a lot of different strategies, trialing out a whole bunch of different things and just seeing what works. Because it's hard with any chronic condition, because as was said at the beginning, everybody is so individual. They can't tell you exactly how a treatment will or won't affect any individual person. So that journey was quite a long one as well, trying to figure out what worked for me, like medication wise, mobility aid wise, what kind of handle do I use on my cane? Like everything like that was such a journey. But now I feel like I'm kind of in a place where, at least for now, under the current circumstances, knock on wood for all of that, I feel like I kind of have it to where I'm making it work. Nothing is easy, nothing is like fabulous or anything, but I'm getting by. I'm making it work.
For me, I would say that physical therapy has somewhat helped me, more so in keeping me stable. It hasn't necessarily helped, but stopped me from getting worse, I would say. But the thing that's helped me the most is my osteopathic manipulative medicine doctor, who was actually a guest speaker for us last year. So if you're interested in hearing from her, you can check out our YouTube channel. I think it was last August, I believe. But she's 100% been the thing that has helped me the most. She'll have me put things, adjust me so that I'm back in place. I don't know if maybe you can see from the video, but my one shoulder's very off because my spine's not in the good place right now.
It's interesting to me that you guys have all brought up specifically healthcare providers that are knowledgeable already, and just how important that is to, you've also all brought up finding healthcare providers who aren't, and just how much of a difference that makes when they are is very apparent to me. So thank you for sharing. I think in the interest of time, we'll have one more question for everyone. In a sentence or two, if the public were to know just one thing about your condition, what would you want that to be?
I think it's a little bit of a cliche, but like, it's real. It's real. It screws me up really bad. I'm not lazy. I'm trying. If I could be fully independent, if I could support myself, that'd be fantastic. I want that. But I can't because this is real. It was more than two, but
I would second what Aaron said, and also I really like the quote. I forget, exactly who said it or where it's from, but it's we're not faking being disabled, we're faking being well.
Yeah, I have something very similar that I kind of wrote down before this, and it's like, I know I'm young, like I'm also in my early 20s, so I'm young and I definitely don't look like what people think stereotypical disability is. But like, I am disabled, we are disabled, like this is absolutely a real thing, and I feel like I'm always working extremely hard to do things that so many people take for granted, while I'm like having to expend every last bit of energy I have in like severe chronic pain, trying to keep my body from falling apart more than it is. But like, I don't share that as like trying to want pity, because I don't enjoy that either. But I do appreciate when people have empathy and kindness when they approach it.
100%. And I think all of you really touched on how much effort is actually going into, like, something we talk about a lot is the spoon theory, when we're thinking about chronic illness, and how much actual mental like work, not just physical but mental work, that's going into managing the day-to-day. And it's all the invisible stuff that no one's seeing, so it's people don't think about it. And so just really want to validate that. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. So we are at 9 o'clock. I know we didn't get to all of our questions, but I think that we had a really, really productive conversation. And I just want to thank you all so much for sharing your personal experiences, for being vulnerable. I know I learned a lot, and just really want to honor your time and your experiences. So thank you so much. And if there are any questions at this point, this is a good time to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can call on you. And yeah, otherwise, if there aren't any questions, or if there are, that's really fine. But just some announcements looking forward. June, we're going to be talking about mast cell disease. I know we mentioned that a little bit today. So we are going to have a complete focus on mast cell activation syndrome next month. And like I mentioned, the presentation meeting and the guest speaker event, we're going to have both of those next month. And so our first one is on June 4th at 8 p.m. And then the guest speaker event will be June 18th at 8 p.m. But sadly, June is going to be our final month of hosting a separate presentation meeting. What we're going to be doing going from July is we're going to be having one like all together meeting that's going to have our guest speaker events at that, but then we're also going to kind of combine our presentation event in that as well. So hopefully we can really increase like the cohesion and really have that dialogue be more like connected through that one meeting. So that's going to be exciting. But next month we are doing our final 2 series events. But yeah, if anyone has any other questions, this would be a great time. Otherwise, if there are no questions, another announcement we just wanted to make is that we are also still looking for volunteers who are interested in working with us, and there's potential for spots to help volunteer and help out with one of our committees. So if you or anyone you know potentially might be interested, you think that this is something that they would be interested in doing, have the time to help out with, that would be great. We're always looking for more volunteers. We're always looking for more people to help spread the word. And so that would be great if anyone would love to volunteer. And then once again, our social media information is right here. We are on Instagram and YouTube, as well as our website. And we have our QR code posted here that will take you to our link tree. But that's kind of the formal end of our presentation. Once again, thank you to our guest speakers. If there are any questions, once again, please let us know.